What is Vampire the Requiem? Initially released in 2004 and then given a second edition in 2014, Vampire the Requiem is a tabletop role-playing game of personal horror, and the spiritual successor to a little game called Vampire the Masquerade, which you might know from the TTRPG, the video game, the TTRPG, the video game, the TTRPG, the video game, or the Mind's Eye Theater LARP. And with the digital toolkit for Masquerade out now, the old World of Darkness core books getting a fresh coat of 5th edition paint, and often immediately going out of print, and Bloodlines 2 promising to be probably not that good. I mean, maybe 10s across the board, but I don't think so. There's never been a better time to not play Vampire the Masquerade, but instead to definitely play Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition. Because they don't want you to play Requiem, they want you to forget about it. They want to take the innovative gameplay mechanics and all the little fixes that Requiem developed and backdoor them into VTM 5th edition, but they water them down and they mess with the Covenants, and they still can't stop with the meta plot and the novel characters and the pre-written prerequisite. And Vamp Requiem 2 is still out there, ready to be enjoyed for the wonderful gem of tabletop gaming that I truly believe it to be. And I have some feelings about it and some information for you, so let me get this off my chest. Let me do this lore explainer thingy so that you know how to approach VTR and how to think about playing it, which you should do. And don't worry, this isn't a dunking on Masquerade thing. I don't care about that. That part's done. It's time to talk about Requiem. What is a lore primer? When J.R.R. Tolkien released The Hobbit in 1937, he began a decades-long process of distilling and sharpening centuries of Western European folklore into a cohesive world. Needless to say, his efforts succeeded, as his story crafting and world building skills prove so singular that to this day, almost all high fantasy media is either rendered in homage to or in opposition to the tropes he codified. It's through this ubiquity that the vast majority of first-time players of fantasy TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Dungeons & Dragons need very little introduction to the basic trappings of a fantasy world. Have you ever met anyone who didn't know what a goblin was? How about a Strix, a ghoul, a Lancea et Sanctum Nosferatu Inquisitor? Not only has there not been a singular unifying literary force in the world of vampire fiction, although Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles comes close, the Chronicles of Darkness does not crib exclusively from existing source material in its lore, leading to a potential gap between the cultural and media-based knowledge of vampires possessed by a potential player and the constructed world of the Requiem. This video will attempt to address that gap, filling in the blanks and sanding off the edges of your knowledge of vampires and other supernatural creatures, so that by the time you begin play you feel at least as comfortable in the neo-gothic nightscape of the World of Darkness as you would in any generic dragon dungeon. Let's get started with the big picture, after this quick caveat. Everything that follows is the rough sum of Western vampire gnosis and understanding of reality. The player characters might know slightly less at the beginning and might develop a slightly deeper understanding than is presented here as the game progresses. Mortal knowledge is approximate to our own culture's understanding of vampires, albeit with more abduction-style personal accounts of the supernatural mirroring ways in which our world experiences the question of near-Earth alien activity. The ambiguities of this setting are intentional and reflect VTR's toolkit approach to the Chronicles of Darkness universe, giving the players and storyteller permission to be creative by using the setting as a setting, not a collection of prescribed plots wedged into a cumbersome uberfiction. What I want to do here is add my own small interpretive spin onto the toolkit, primarily as a guide for myself and my players as I embark on a chronicle within a homebrewed Seattle, and additionally as a bridge into the genre-as-game world of White Wolf RPGs. This is not a rules introduction and will not teach you the mechanical crunch of the game system. It is solely an introduction to the setting and how to think about playing the game.
Okay, let's get started.
The world is a vampire sent to drain.
The new World of Darkness is a setting very much like our own Earth. The same mortal wars were fought over the same gold, oil, and gods, spilling the same blood on the same muddy fields at the behest of the same kings, czars, and presidents. On the surface, the human spheres of art, commerce, and public life are still easily recognizable. McDonald's still serves up 60 hamburgers a second worldwide, Napoleon still choked at Waterloo, The Beatles played the Ed Sullivan Show to the same thunderous applause, and the bomb still fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, to individuals in the know, the differences between our reality and the NWAD are stark and disturbing. The shoulder turned by a stranger is colder. The fog is thicker. Dreams are lurid and pursue the dreamer into waking life. The shadows are deeper, and within the shadows walk nightmares. Beneath the veil of seeming, nothing is the same. As long as humankind has walked the earth, struggling mightily to push back the cold dark of the universe and live out its brief moment in the sun, it has been beset by a myriad of twisted reflections. There are parasites of many kinds beneath the surface, playing at life and love as they subsist on pale imitations of these ecstatic truths experienced in full by the people they consider themselves superior to. In short, here there be monsters. The New World of Darkness is a universe defined by its supernatural denizens and their interactions with the human race, and each individual chronicle is characterized by the ratios of the creature types from individual game lines present in their version of the larger setting. I have found that the best way to plot out a diverse but manageable Chronicles of Darkness campaign is to populate your world primarily with your chosen game line supernatural, and then adding a small amount of another type of supernatural, and a minuscule amount of a third type from a third game line. The Emerald City 67 verse, which I will be using as my sample world, is a Vampire the Requiem based New World of Darkness setting, and as such features kindred, vampires, as its primary supernatural inhabitants, occupying the planet at a rate of about 1 kindred to 100,000 kine worldwide. This ratio shifts significantly in rural and urban areas, and can be estimated as closer to 1 in 25,000 in population centers, which are the preferred hunting grounds of the vast majority of the damned. As such, there are roughly 60 vampires that call Seattle home at the Chronicle's start date. The second most prominent type of supernatural creatures are werewolves, a species of half-spirit humanoids who pass their genetic talents for shapeshifting and detecting dangerous apparitions along hereditary lineages. There is roughly 1 werewolf for every 10 vampires on Earth, which is good news for vampires since the Forsaken are about as easy to kill as a semi-truck and salivate compounds that can halt a vampire's healing factor in seconds. These two primary species together make up a total of 94% of the world's supernatural occupants, with the other 6% coming down mostly to nasties, a catch-all term for uncategorized haunts, spooks, and monsters, usually encountered as one-off threats to the players, and often created by meddling and power backlash from other more established types of supernaturals. Before we move on to numbers, it's important to establish that mages and mage cosmology are considered non-canon in my setting, where werewolf cosmology is considered semi-canon where it doesn't conflict significantly with vampiric lore. Now it's time to look at some charts. Wow, that's a lot of licks. Sure seems like vampires really rule the roost around here. And since werewolves tend to shy away from cities, skewing their population in the exact opposite ways as kindred, most of the time you're going to be dealing with vampires as your primary source of conflict on both sides of the table. Well, that and humans. But come on, look at how many vampires there are. Why don't they just take over, push the mortals out of the way? I mean, who's gonna stop them? Werewolves? Oh look, another graph. That's why. That's why vampires don't rule the world. Because people do. People have always ruled the world, and vampires have always leached off of the fruits of humanity's labors and vision, while pretending that they own them, pretending that they are the masters and humans are the vermin, rather than the other way around. More on that and the vampiric traditions of secrecy that it necessitates later. If we want to understand the role that vampires play in the world, we first have to understand what they are, where they come from, and how they work. Let's start from the beginning. What is a kindred? In the Emerald City 67 New World of Darkness setting, vampirism is a transmissible supernatural infection that alters the host's body in a number of nearly universal ways, alongside rarer expressions of the curse that prove the rules via exception and/or modify its forms down inheritable lineages called clans. The following precepts are the rules of thumb and are true in over 99% of cases. The basics. 1. The curse is transmitted intentionally from a vampire, the sire, to a human who will become the vampire's child. The sire drains the human of all of their blood, killing them. Once the human is dead, the vampire quickly feeds the corpse a few drops of its own magically infected blood, called vitae. When the human consumes the vitae, it is changed into a vampire and rises in undeath. This process is known as the embrace. 2. Vampirism changes the body in several significant ways, imparting a slew of basic boons and banes to the new host of the curse. The first condition is immortality powered by the consumption of blood. If the vampire steadily feeds on a diet of fresh human blood, they will never grow old or die. The youngest of vampires can get away with animal blood as food for a short while, but quickly find that only human will satisfy their growing hunger. And vampires over a certain age can only survive on the blood of other vampires, lest they willingly submit to slumber for a period of time. This is one side effect of blood potency, a scale of blood thickness that relates to a vampire's active age, increasing their power and hunger the longer they are alive. Also, whatever mortal age you are when you're embraced, your body remains. 3. Vampires are no longer the body, but the blood, and can use their vitae as a resource to fuel their dark powers, ranging from physical augmentations to ESP. The supernatural skills of vampires vary from individual to individual, but almost all vampires possess extraordinary strength, agility, and toughness when compared to a normal human. In particular, all vampires are able to augment their temporal immortality with a more direct expenditure of blood to rapidly heal even the most gruesome of injuries, provided they aren't derived from any of their supernatural banes. Let's see what I mean by that. 4. So vampires are super tough, can get all in your brain, and never get old and die? What's the catch? Well, there's several, the first of which being that the sun kills you. Sunlight, both direct and reflected by terrestrial sources, deals aggravated damage to vampires depending on their humanity level and age. This means that a newly minted scab biter who loves Jesus and saving kittens will only break out into nasty, searingly painful blisters that take weeks to heal and smell like rotten flesh, while Granddaddy Methuselah, chairman of the Child Murder Society, goes up like gasoline-soaked flash paper, never to be seen again, as soon as he touches any sunlight, at all. 5. Also, thou shalt eat only ashes and drink only blood. So yes, you can sustain yourself on the blood of humans and other vamps, but that's it. No eating or drinking ever. All food and drink is rejected by the vampiric body outright, as though you were attempting to shove it in your ear rather than an orifice designed for eating. Painful, messy, conspicuous. This ties into the next point. 6. You're dead. You are a corpse, preserved and piloted by a magical ball of blood, which contains your consciousness. You can't eat, you don't breathe or blink unless you're pretending on purpose, you usually have no pulse of any kind, your skin is ice cold, and your genitals can't get hard or wet. Vampires can temporarily subvert these unfortunate symptoms of undeath by burning vitae to incur the blush of life, wherein they restore their body to normal functions for a short period of time, permitting coitus, eating and drinking, and other breathers-only activities. Any food or drink swallowed during blush is inevitably vomited up in a bloody gush a short period after the vamp goes cold again. Geez, that all sounds awful. Well, why does anyone want to get turned? And even if they do get turned non-con style, why don't they just step out into the sun? Why would you perpetuate this? What do you get out of it? What's keeping you in the game? 7. Vampires possess a dark passenger. The ride-along, the little tyrant in the mind that wails for blood at all hours of the night. The Beast. The Beast is many things, and its exact manifestations vary, but to all vampires it is the survival instinct made literal. The voice of the curse demanding that you drink blood, flee the sun, and above all, continue to persist in your undeath come hell or high water. If a vampire were to attempt suicide by sunlight, it would first have to go through the Beast, pushing past a screaming wall of psychic energy demanding the vampire do anything but die. In dire situations, the Beast will attempt to wrest control of the body from the mind, steering it to safety or blood no matter what obstacles lay in its way. This is called a frenzy. The beast is the force that teaches you how to be a monster. It is the big brother that raises its hackles at a challenge, that shows you how to persist, even when the man, the rational memory of human life still inside of you, doesn't want to. 8. Blood feels so good. Feeding is a cross between a physical need like thirst or hunger and a chemical addiction surpassing the most potent drugs accessible to humanity. A vampire denied blood will first become weak, then ill, then insane, and finally functionally dead. But a vampire who can feed will feed, because it is an act of mind-altering pleasure, often for both the vampire and the victim, who is subject to a hypnotic effect of vampire physiology known as the kiss, which permits pleasurable feedings whose aftermaths are easily healed by licking the puncture wounds. In short, you don't get out because you don't want to. The high is too damn good. Okay, so the deathcore frontman in my head won't let me rest until I've used my superpowers to slake the impossible thirst for the most mind-blowingly delectable substance on the planet. Things are starting to make sense now. So vampires burn in the sun, drink blood to stay alive forever, and have all kinds of crazy powers? That sounds familiar. Are all the other myths true, like garlic? Not quite. Let's wrap up the basics with a bit of Mythbusters, speed round style. Garlic? Nope, not an actual deterrent. Crosses? Definitely not. Lots of vampires worship God in their own strange ways and carry crucifixes themselves. Running water? Needing an invitation? Arithmomania? Salt? Silver? No, to all of them. At least not as far as basic, relatively sane vampires go. There is potential for individuals to grow into these derangements as they age, believing them to be true as they lose their grip on reality, potentially creating the myths in the first place. Werewolves, though, do hate silver. Can they survive on animal blood? What about bagged blood? Animal blood is essentially kindred baby food and quickly loses its appeal. Stored blood works to nourish the vampiric body about as well as one Capri Sun, as opposed to the 4-course meal of a proper live feeding. So, if you want to avoid going off the deep end, you're not going to be able to keep the vegan thing up for long. Okay, what about steaks? They don't kill vampires outright, but they do paralyze them. If you manage to get a big enough piece of wood impaled through a vampire's heart, its vitae will seep into the wood, robbing them of strength and the ability to manipulate their dead body until it is removed. Beheading? Yep. One of the most surefire ways to kill a vampire is to separate its brain, which serves as a hard drive for its personality and motor controls, from its heart, the arcane power supply unit that gives it unlife. If you blow a hole in a kindred's head with a bullet, as long as its arteries are all in good working order, the heart can quickly regrow destroyed brain matter to the correct specifications, unless the two aren't connected. Okay, sunlight works, so how about fire? Yes, the beast fears fire with almost the same passion that it fears the sun. Vampires are prone to total combustion when touched by even a moderately sized flame, potentially due to a quirk of their supernatural excretions, and take aggravated damage, rapidly being destroyed unless they're able to extinguish themselves. This makes the order of operations for killing a vampire almost always boil down to stake it to immobilize, chop its head off, burn the whole mess to ash. Another myth about vampires that doesn't have anything to do with their banes is the idea that they don't appear in mirrors. This is not true. Vampires have bodies that create reflections just like any mortals, but with their keen predatory senses and innate skill at avoiding detection, let's just say that you'll never see them coming that way. This goes double for being photographed and recorded, which the beast hates and will avoid at all costs. Vampires, also called kindred, are an ancient species of supernatural parasites that turn human hosts via full exsanguination and the sharing of their blood. Vampires are driven by the beast, a dark passenger that works to transform the host's psyche to be more amenable to the vampiric lifestyle, pushing them to survive above all else. The beast seeks blood, the substance needed to sustain vampiric unlife. Vampires must consistently prey on the blood of living humans to support the production of vitae, or vampire blood. Vampires often utilize their boons to this end. Boons are a variety of superhuman talents and magical abilities possessed by kindred to assist them in their eternal loop of nightly survival, often called the Requiem. Boons vary specimen to specimen and have less predictable patterns than banes. Banes are natural deterrents and detriments to vampires. The overwhelming majority of vampires, burned to ash in sunlight and fire, grow desperate and monstrous when deprived, cannot eat or drink as they are corpses, are inert and dead during the day and rise during the night, and are agelessly immortal when supplied with blood. This is immortality, the vampire's greatest boon and greatest bane. Now that you have the basics, let's try the specifics.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste.
The vampires of the world of darkness do not exist as a monolith, but instead in branching sects and splinter cells off the core identity of the curse, with various aberrations and expressions of its dark gifts manifesting in each specimen. While every vampire is unique due to personal cultivation of skills and boons, there are 5 recognized lineages of kindred within the setting that function as the core pillars of difference, typifying the blood throughout the centuries. These families, known as clans, pass their strengths and weaknesses from sire to child, and represent the most significant facets of a vampiric archetype in popular culture and myth, allowing for every chronicle to encompass the entire scope of vampire lore, from the most alluringly human seductors to the most monstrous predators. Every vampire belongs to their sire's clan upon rising, and possesses that status immutably, as a new feature of their biology. Clan status is inherent and need not be asked nor lobbied for. If you're a Ventrue, you are a Ventrue, as much as any human is a human. These blueprints for unlife side far closer to speciation than human constructs like ethnicity or gender, but do not strictly determine the kindred's behavior, only their basic supernatural biology. In addition to clans, there are also capital B bloodlines, further familial specializations within the 5, but these are generally quite rare and hyper-specific. So, for now, let's meet the first of our clans. Ventrue. The Lords of Darkness were born to rule. The Ventrue represent the vampire as a social programmer, the count in the castle, and the cult leader. Wherever vampires roost or humans gather, a Ventrue will surely be attempting to install themselves at the top of some political pyramid, often of their own imagining. The blood of the Ventrue seeks to dominate, to control, and to subdue. Ventrue have in-clan access to the Resilience discipline, which allows their undead body to withstand tremendous punishment, representing their eternal immortal nature as well as the undying states they control. The Animalism discipline allows the lords to ensnare the minds of lesser beings, taking on animal companions and thralls from the entire web of life. Their signature discipline is Dominate, which permits control over sapient beings, ranging from hypnosis to mind control, memory alteration, and even outright possession. Ventrue do not always come out on top, but when they don't, it is rare enough to warrant comment, especially with regards to Invictus organizations. Their beast is the king of the jungle, pushing them upwards, demanding a view from above, a perch to hunt from. Ventrue never feel safe unless they're on top, snugly tucked away in their haven, watching their minions trudge through the freezing rain to bring pieces of that delicious darkness back home to them. Their clan bane is the Aloof Curse. Just as their blood compels them to possess and manipulate humanity, it also distances them from the subjects they prey upon. Ventrue have an increased tendency to lose interest in morality, and to view humans as tools and toys rather than living, breathing people. They suffer penalties to maintaining touchstones and regaining humanity through them, and are prone to derangements at high blood potency and low humanity. Ventrue. They're in your mind, making themselves comfortable, and even if you fought back, you couldn't hurt them in a way that matters. They've already won. The Deva. The serpents are the most beautiful of all of the clans, and often the most cruel. They represent the vampire as the dark suitor, the succubus, the home wrecker, and the golden idol climbing down from its pedestal. While the Ventrue expresses his attachments to humanity by attempting to control the kind from behind the curtain, the Deva insert themselves into the center of attention, allowing mortals to give of their own free will. Their blood compels them to be the unlife of the party, using their unnatural beauty and charisma to effortlessly charm onlookers, both mortal and otherwise. Deva have in-clan access to the Majesty discipline, which allows them to innately fascinate their prey, drawing in eager blood without so much as lifting a finger. However, even the most vapid serpent is much more than a pretty face. The physical disciplines celerity and vigor deliver on the promise of the Deva's perfect corpses, making them ungodly fast and impossibly strong respectively. This combination emphasizes the Deva's body as its instrument and the world as its stage. As the sexy vampires of the bunch, Deva tend to spend the most time around mortals out of the entire family tree. This presents both unique advantages and disadvantages, one of them being their bane, the wanton curse. For Deva, promiscuity in feeding partners is a must, no matter the strain it puts on the masquerade. If a Deva drinks from the same mortal vessel one too many times, they can become obsessed with their donor, suffering penalties for drinking from subjects other than their beloved. So, one night stands only, unless you're planning on taking them home with you for good. Impossibly fast and strong, perfect ice-cold skin, color-changing eyes, Deva, the blood and the body united as one, in carnality and violence indistinguishable. The Gangrel. The Ferals walk the spaces in between civilization and the wild fringes, between animal and man, between man and beast. The Gangrel represent the vampire in its most savage, predatory state, inspiring legends of wolfmen, shape-changers, and clouds of bats coalescing into a hungry, swarming shadow. While the beast of the other clan sits in the recesses of the psyche, manifesting only in pivotal moments, the Gangrel beast is a constant companion, boiling close to the surface of the blood, ready to surge to the forefront at a moment's notice. Gangrel can use this to their advantage by invoking the Red Surrender, an ability which enters them into frenzy with slightly more control than the average lick, a process known as riding the wave, which can be both incredibly effective and horribly dangerous, to say nothing of its addictive qualities. This proximity also provides a certain malleability to the Gangrel corpus, embodied by their signature Protean discipline, which allows them to transform their body in a number of ways ranging from subtle to extreme. Any story you've heard of a vampire turning into mist, a bat, a wolf, or a mass of writhing tentacles beyond comprehension? That's the power of Protean. Of course, a mundane but universally popular application is to simply transform one's hands into talons, hooks, or any other bladed weapon. The Animalism discipline allows Gangrel to interface with and control animals by the same mechanism with which they imitate them, and the Resilience discipline makes them incredibly difficult to kill, especially when coupled with their usually strong physical stat lines. After all, when you can painlessly melt your body into a pool of blood or a swarm of rats, what hope could a weapon have against you? The Gangrel tendency to frenzy is both a boon and a bane, as the feral curse can make it difficult for them to resist becoming enraged when it counts, and penalizes them for entering frenzy without intending to. Although they may struggle with the beast and tantrum, when walking carefully alongside it, Gangrel often prove themselves to be among the most temperate and wise of all kindred. Lonely pioneers, violent pilgrims, savage gurus, strange hunters stalking their prey at the edges of civilization. The only thing the blood cannot be is still. The Mekhet. The shadows have the silence of the night running through their very veins. Representing the vampire as a creature of darkness and secrecy, the Mekhet are the oracles, spies, scholars, and stalkers of undead society. Their thumbprint is occult mystery, their passion is information, and their prey never, ever see them coming. Did you hear that behind you? Well, if you did, it means it wasn't a Mekhet. The Watchful clan possesses innate access to 2 powerful mental disciplines and a 3rd physical discipline. Auspex is their signature ability, first serving to heighten their physical senses to superhuman levels, and later imparting entirely new modes of sensory perception, such as aura vision, mind reading, and psychometry. Their 2nd discipline serves the exact opposite purpose, as one who collects secrets surely has much to hide. Obfuscate is the discipline of disguise and vanishment, allowing practitioners to conceal intentions, objects, people, and at the highest levels, entire locations from notice, mortal or otherwise. These skills are complemented by celerity, allowing Mekhet to move as quick as they are quiet, appearing or vanishing in the time it takes you to reach for the light switch. While these disciplines are powerful, they also offer no direct control and aren't much help in a brawl, informing the Shadow's tendency to work behind the scenes, pulling the strings in far subtler ways than their Ventrue counterparts, for example. But after all, the darkness is where the Mekhet work best. The infinite bloody mysteries of the night are powerful secrets to embody, but take their toll on the Mekhet mind in the form of their clan bane, the Tenebrous Curse. Their connection to the concealing dark and piercing light as both physical and metaphysical forces make their minds vulnerable to developing additional personal banes, psychological allergies and compulsions picked up during their long, quiet requiems. Many of the old wives' tales of vampires refusing to cross running water, waiting to be invited in, and counting spilled grains of rice are probably examples of elder Mekhet mental illnesses manifesting as unique bans on behavior. Younger Mekhet are also likely to develop more severe reactions to sunlight and to feel the pull of a long torpor more acutely than their peers as their banes rapidly take root in their psyches. To the Shadows, every night is a mystery, waiting patiently to be unraveled. Try not to make yourself look like a key piece of the puzzle.
When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone.
The Nosferatu. Some kindred keep the ugliness of their curses locked deep within the recesses of their diseased souls, hiding their repulsive nature from prying eyes. The haunts are forced to wear the ugliness of their curse on their faces, showcasing their supernatural nature through a palpable physical tell. This is the physical side of their clan bane, the Lonely Curse. Each member of the Nosferatu family tree is uniquely deformed, like a flurry of hideous snowflakes, although certain ancestral themes resonate through the blood like a backbeat. They can be broken down into roughly 3 main categories, all of which serve the same purpose of isolating the haunt and serving as a means to channel their fearsome powers. First, monstrous visages. Kindred whose faces and bodies wouldn't be out of place on a poster for a horror movie. Including many classic Nosfed archetypes like the Orlok, these vampires are twisted in ways that make them look obviously inhuman and terrifying. Warped heads, cluttered jaws of razor-sharp teeth, milky eyes, sunken nasal cavities. The twist of the grave. These vampires have at least a few things seriously wrong with their appearance snuck in as part of a more normal bodily tableau, but generally can pass as human for a short time. Most twist Nosferatu have a collection of disfigurements that add up to the full experience, such as eyes that blink horizontally and elongated vertebral spikes, and teeth that appear to be screwed in backwards. The sinister. These haunts appear physically normal, or at least normal for a vampire, but even a short period in their presence unsettles and disgusts. Their curse manifests beyond their physical appearance in some capacity, but is no less unnerving for it. an animated shadow that constantly moves independent of its owner, making rude and threatening gestures. An eye-watering stench of formaldehyde and rotten meat, utterly perfect beauty, to the point that it distracts and nauseates, inciting jealousy and hatred. A persistent, itchy, crawling feeling all over one's skin whenever eye contact is made with the haunt. Something moving just beneath the vamp's dermis, wriggling, just out of sight, always around the back of the head or in the crook of the elbow as soon as you start looking for it. As long as it inspires disgust and fear, it is fair game for a sinister-style Nosferatu. The Nosferatu, in all of their unfortunate forms, represent the vampire as an archon of fear, the nightmare made flesh, the alligator in the sewers, the hunchback in the clock tower, the monster. These disfigurements and the isolation they engender are a price paid for great power, because that discomfort, that big bubble of fear you feel pushing at your brainstem, it's not just for show, it's a weapon held tight in the haunt's hand, and it's so easy to pull the trigger. The Nightmare Discipline is the Nosferatu's signature ability, leveraging their naturally off-putting presence to inspire fear in those around them. From hindering a target's skills with a miasma of knock-knee terror, creating hallucinations of someone's darkest thoughts, and literally scaring someone to death, Nightmare pulls on the gut fears of those around you, creating tactical retreats in soiled trousers with ease. This terror is justified by the Nazi's other in-clan disciplines, Vigor and Obfuscate, allowing them to hide from sight until they're prepared to strike with all of their horrifying strength. With that said, this doesn't mean that they're all monstrous, the blood just dealt them a challenging hand. In fact, haunts can be some of the nicest vampires around, since they're further removed from the beast than many other clans, and have to be exceedingly socially gracious to get people to spend any time around them at all. Just watch out for the ones that have decided to make their insides match their outsides. Due to their condition, it's common for haunts to establish separate sub-communities within a city, often creating colonies beneath the earth in sewer systems or abandoned mines, forming complex networks of catacombs known as necropoli, although many still choose to live topside for the majority of their requiems. Another unique tradition within the clan is their tendency to embrace out of spite, anger, or hatred, viewing their curse as something to test an unworthy mortal with, forcing them to prove their righteousness or surrender to despair at their monstrosity made manifest. The Brothers Worm, a culture, a world unto themselves, ever out of step with the traditional rhythms of the dance macabre. Don't mind the face, it's just honesty. The other clans could learn a lot from them, you know? So, a vampire belonging to one of those 5 clans embraces a mortal intentionally, creating a new vampire from the same clan. Simple, right? Until it isn't. Here's a brief list of the half-damned, a subset of unfortunate undesirables who have some relationship to the vampiric affliction but are not true kindred. Larvae. 0 blood potency vampires embraced by a sire who did not spend the requisite point of willpower to impart the vital spark of sapience into the child, rendering them no more than savage, mindless monsters who seek blood and violence ceaselessly. Essentially, someone who rose as a Draugr. Draugr. A kindred whose beast has conquered its humanity, permanently rendering it a heartless monster who thinks only in clear-cut terms of survival, violence, pleasure, and power. Most Draugr are mindless beasts like the larvae that imitate them, only with full blood potency and access to disciplines, but there are rumors of Draugr who still walk within the All-Night Society, lurking like mortal serial killers, waiting to strike at far loftier targets. Revenants. Botched spontaneous vampires created when a low humanity vampire kills a human who had recently ingested vitae by exsanguinating them. The majority of people killed with vitae in their systems, even by low humanity kindred, do not rise as revenants, but those unlucky few that do have 0 blood potency, no clan, and sweat out all stored vitae in day sleep, making their new unlives a constant fight for survival. They are almost always terminated by the ruling state or their own sires to keep the peace, but can be re-embraced into a proper vampire under the right circumstances. Dhampirs. The biological offspring of a human and a vampire, In the overwhelming majority of cases, vampires are sterile, even when under the effects of the blush of life. But once in a blue moon, with the help of ritual sorcery, a vampire sires a mortal spawn. The resulting child is human, but tainted indelibly by their vampiric parents' nature. Their blood is not nourishing to outclan vampires. They bear a diluted supernatural resemblance to their parents' clan. Nosferatu Dhampir are often strange and off-putting, Deva Dhampir are alluring and sociable, etc. And they act as a supernatural lure towards in-clan vampires, who are fated to be destroyed once they have consumed the Dhampir's blood. Now you know the kindred family tree inside and out, plus the ways that its propagation can go hideously awry. Before we take the next step into the societies of the Chronicles, let's take just a second to examine the humans that orbit vampires, often symbiotically inserting themselves into the dance macabre. Ghouls. A ghoul is a living human who has ingested vitae. See, vitae isn't just delicious to vampires. Everybody loves it. It first provides the mortal drinker with euphoria and a sense of mental clarity and alertness, and then the supernatural side effects kick in. Someone who consumes a full point of vitae from a vampire who expends willpower is ghouled, which gives them access to scaled-down versions of their domitor's disciplines and prevents them from aging. To remain ghouled, and, in the case of older specimens, prevent the immediate re-aging process, 1 year per day, one must consume a point of vitae per month. Of course, the average ghoul will want significantly more vitae if they can get it, because it's also incredibly addictive. Ghouls are a constant across all of kindred society, useful as bodyguards, retainers, errand runners, companions, and servants, although frowned upon in certain circumstances as a breach of the masquerade. Thralls. Remember the addictive properties of blood? Here's another twist on that. Not only is vitae such a pleasant high that ghouls become hooked on consuming it, it also carries with it a narcotic emotional attachment to the donor. When you drink someone's vitae, you begin to feel a powerful artificial love for them. The first drink is a tickling crush, a strong admiration, a desire to spend more time with them. The second drink is a rush of butterflies in the stomach, a halo of beauty and warmth surrounding their gaunt features, an adrenaline spike from a simple word of praise. The third drink completes the blood bond, forming the vinculum, the tether between regnant and thrall, which renders the thrall deeply loyal and emotionally devoted to their master. At the third stage, all lesser blood bonds are shattered, and the thrall will often obey and artificially love their master even if they still loathe them just beneath the surface of the bond. A weak-willed or emotionally unstable individual will feel their thraldom as a reverent obsession with their master, where a strong-willed, independent personality will feel deeply positive, moving emotions, but regain a measure of control over themselves despite the infatuation. The vinculum and lesser bonds can be broken with a year of separation from the last drink, but if you are both ghoul and thrall, good luck staying away for long enough. Animals and kindred can also be rendered thrall, which informs the kindred hesitancy to consume the blood of their own. Most ghouls are thralls, but most thralls are not ghouls. It's difficult to keep an individual ghouled for long periods of time without creating some kind of significant blood bond, unless you deliberately feed your ghoul on a diverse diet of your friends and enemies. Most ghouls are subject to the vinculum by design, lest they become independent and operate as a free agent, taking jobs from random licks off the street for a hit of vitae. After all, a mortal with free will and access to vampiric disciplines with none of the drawbacks is a dangerous thing indeed. The vinculum lasts far longer than ghoul status though, 12 months to 1 month, and the vast majority of thralls are not afforded the luxury of consistent feedings. Again, because maintaining ghouls is expensive and dangerous. The typical experience of a human thrall is one of either external servitude, acting as a mole in human affairs like the police force, or internal servitude, as seen below. Herds. The most common fate for a non-ghoul thrall within their regnant's active circle is that of a herd member, a group of mortals retained by a vampire in a fixed location for the express purpose of easy feeding. Due to the pleasure of the kiss and the power of the vinculum, an appropriately dull and guileless herd member is often content to sit in a backwater apartment all day eating junk food, watching television, and playing spin the bottle with their peers until their dark master awakens at dusk to harvest from them. Beware attempting to herdify a ghoul, however, as their unique condition makes them more protective of their blood than normal mortals, and most ghouls instinctively see feeding from them to be a breach of the contract between domitor and servant. Additionally, given that one must feed a ghoul regularly to ensure loyalty and top performance, you're typically just watering down your own vitae rather than gaining new sustenance. Blood dolls. Dollies are a symptom of a looser local masquerade, and refer to non-herded mortals who routinely seek the company of vampires to experience the pleasure of the kiss. While not explicitly belonging to a specific vampire circle, they find themselves as a regular fixture in kindred affairs, perhaps as waitstaff at a party or a specialist tradesperson who offers their unique skills up for the simple joy of being fed on, cycling through as many undead partners as they can without passing out from blood loss.
Can you bless me with something?
Oh, gosh.
Money-wise? Please.
Can you suck it?
What?
That about covers who vampires are, and we've established what they do on a basic night-to-night basis, what with the hunts and the resource accumulation and all. But how do all of these factors intersect? How does who we are and what we do form a larger, more cohesive whole? Humans are highly social animals, and though vampires aren't humans anymore, the average kindred recalls fondly what it was like to be a part of something bigger than themselves. That's the man talking, the memory of life. And even when transformed into nocturnal hunters, the embers of cooperative behavior smolder bright in each corpse. And so, vampires flock together, despite their natural paranoia and tendency to fits of violence. They're kindred, after all. Blood calls to blood, time after time, for who could understand a monster better than a monster? This latent instinct, the memories of love, belonging, and unity, push kindred to form complex subcultures, the largest 5 of which will be hereafter referred to as the Covenants. Although each covenant has sweeping ideological differences and night-to-night focuses, there are a few major conventions honored by all civilized kindred. Before we explore the secret societies of the night, we must first understand the core customs which echo through the blood on instinct, serving as the underpinnings of every undead social circle in existence, whether its members acknowledge it or not. These are the 3 immutable traditions, innately hardwired into the blood. Together, they keep the species, and perhaps all the world, from annihilation. The first tradition, masquerade. Do not reveal your nature to those not of the blood. Doing so forfeits your claim to the blood. Don't tell people that you're a vampire. This is the first tradition, the grand conspiracy, the masquerade, the pantomime which protects all kindred of the world from the kine, one lie at a time. Yes, that's right, protects the monsters from the humans. Remember those graphs? There's just too many humans and too few vampires, especially in the last 600 years or so. In an all-out war of attrition, humanity wins every time. As a result, very few sane damned deny the necessity of the masquerade, which in turn makes it easier for any given vamp to uphold for themselves. I say uphold for themselves because the masquerade isn't just how vampires keep the human species at large ignorant of their existence. Night to night, it's more about how each vampire keeps the mortals in their personal orbit from discovering the truth of their affliction. It's not about humanity knowing. It's about the club bouncer that saw you biting neck in the bathroom knowing, and how you get him to stop knowing. It's about keeping your landlady, your English language instructor, and your mechanic in the dark. It's about the fact that someone's always finding out somewhere, but as long as they're not finding out about you specifically, things are probably going to turn out okay for you. After all, this is why the tradition is innate. The beast wants to live, and it knows that too much attention is dangerous. As far as the big picture goes, remember, it's our world, just with a twist. How would you react if someone told you that vampires were real? Like, really real? You'd think they were insane. People always do. So, since word of mouth rarely works and the beast gets camera shy, all that falls to you is controlling for eyewitnesses. And you'd better do your part, because one way or another, openly flouting the first tradition will see you destroyed every single time. But hey, what's the fun in all these cool powers if you never get to show them off, right? Like I said before, somebody's always finding out somewhere, and one night it'll be because of you. It's no secret that even the most sensible rules are meant to be broken, and kindred aren't strangers to transgression. Even though vampiric survival depends on the overwhelming majority of humans believing that they're nothing more than folktales and ghost stories, their continued existence also demands that most vampires must interface directly with humans on a regular basis. Blood doesn't grow on trees, you know. And if you don't feel like committing murder every time you get hungry, you're gonna have to let some people in on the secret, at least tangentially. So, in a world where you have to feed on humans but aren't supposed to let the cat out of the bag, what's to be done? There's no faster way to sever your tenuous connection to morality and sanity than to spend too much time away from the company of mortals, so you're gonna have to find a compromise. Luckily, the kiss itself works wonders for the masquerade writ large, since its overwhelming pleasure fogs the mind and bends the will towards cooperation, and when done properly, leaves no trace. That means that most careful feedings rarely threaten secrecy. But what about ghouls, herds, my best friend, my ex-husband, my mommy and daddy? The general consensus is that when you plan to tip your hand to a breather, you should act with extreme caution. First, ensure that your target is the type to be taken in by the world of the dead rather than scared away. When you choose a vessel you plan to drink from regularly, or induct for other reasons, ensure that the precautions are taken to enchant and fascinate them, rather than leaving them repulsed. Let them in on the secret only a tiny bit at a time. Never show the whole picture. Imply that they're special, that you trust them to keep it to themselves, that their vow of silence is all that maintains their tether to a world they never imagined could be real. A world of danger, romance, and power. Mortals love all that shit. Second, remind yourself that even though plenty of liberties are taken with the traditions, they exist for a reason. Never believe that what you are doing is safe, smart, or sustainable. Always acknowledge your folly, because doing so teaches you to cover your ass and to pull the plug at the first sign of danger. Finally, remember that every single discipline, boon, and ability you possess can and should be used in the service of the lie. If things go south, the reason you can shapeshift, disappear, hypnotize, embrace, and kill with tooth and claw is to protect your secret. The second tradition. Progeny. Sire another at the peril of both yourself and your progeny. If you create a child, the weight is yours to bear. The embrace is a big deal. Siring is a big deal. Another whiny, angsting mouth to feed in the competitive, crowded world of the dance macabre is a big deal. Vampires are resource competitive by nature, meaning that despite certain pretenses of cooperation, at the end of the night, the more kindred there are, the less kind there are to go around. Feeding grounds and territory are already the single biggest point of contention between most feuding covenants, far beyond their ideological differences, and every time a new fledgling hits the streets, things get even dicier. Remember 1 in 100,000? That's predator-prey dynamics at work. Each vampire puts a unique strain on their environment, polluting the well a bit more for everyone else, threatening the first tradition and disrupting the hierarchy. Thus, almost without fail, the ruling faction in a given domain will have a vested interest in limiting the amount of childer being created. In more lenient locales, the prince or similar would enforce a right of census, demanding to, at the very least, be informed of the siring of new kindred, possibly leveling taxes for embracing and stepping in to limit excessive propagation. The average kindred prince would probably take this a step further, requiring that their permission be sought before siring, lest the progeny be considered illegal and marked for death. This allows the ruler of a domain to protect both their local masquerade and to keep a firm grip on power, preventing public expansion of rival covenants and factions. In the most restrictive and authoritarian of cities, the second tradition is weaponized as an offshoot of the first, where ghouling, thralling, and even simply herding consenting humans are considered forms of progeny creation, requiring permission and taxation on pain of final death. This intense policing of the second tradition in all jurisdictions, as opposed to the first, comes as a direct result of propagation being far less ambiguous than masquerade breaches. That is, until people start siring in secret. But why would you want to sire someone anyway? To doom a mortal to an existence of violence and fear, night after night until the end of the world or a painful final death? What could be more cruel? Well, it gets lonely, doesn't it? Not every vampire sires a child, but every vampire in living memory was sired by someone, and almost always on purpose. Except probably Dracula, but that's another story. The truth is that there are as many reasons to sire as there are vampires roaming the night. From power consolidation to bloodline preservation, love, hate, life-saving, coercion, lust, loneliness, and everything in between, at some point in every vampire's long requiem, they realize that they have the power to bring another into the dark alongside them, for better or for worse. More often than not, siring occurs due to a mutual fascination. Vamp meets breather, they enchant each other with yin-yang worldviews and shared core desires, reigniting the vampire's interest in mortal affairs. Something about this one is different. The vamp doesn't want to let this one go. The breather, for their part, wants to know more, to get closer, to go all the way, and the vampire is all too prepared to give them what they want, consequences be damned. And thus, in a moment of transgression, caution thrown to the winds, the human dies and a new vampire is born. The thing is, as litigators of the second tradition will tell you, there's really no such thing as an illegitimate child. After all, the tradition doesn't say that you shall not propagate, or place any restrictions on it at all, really. If anything, it acknowledges that siring is an inevitability, a requirement for the blood to persist. All it says is that, like it or not, the responsibility for your childer lies with you, and you'll be judged as such. And for its part, this is probably as close as one can get to another immutable truth. In short, no prince or archbishop or grand worm can take away your ability to bring new death into the world, but they might still try to kill you over it. So when considering the embrace, just remember that it's a solo parent gig, and there are absolutely no takebacks. And in the end, the biggest critics of your embrace are often your childer themselves. The third tradition, Amaranth. You are forbidden from devouring the heart's blood of your kind. If you violate this law, the beast calls to your own blood. Thou shalt not eat another vampire. Remember Vitae? Remember Vinculum? Vampires drinking vampire blood as a ritual expression of intimacy or servitude? Well, something happens when you drain that final drop, exsanguinating another kindred completely and destroying them. Something even the most callous of vampires shudder at the thought of. Diablerie. Often regarded as the single worst way a kindred can meet their final death, which, I might add, places it above entrants like decapitation and immolation, the act of consuming another vampire fully is more complex and horrific than it might initially sound. Since the vampire is itself the blood inhabiting the body as a vessel, when the vampire is fully drained by an assailant, their very essence is ingested and subsumed into their killer. This process is excruciatingly painful, both physically and psychologically, as all trace of the kiss disappears to be replaced with the white-hot, searing sensation that one's personhood is being liquefied and stretched away from its point of origin, until it finally snaps and is consumed. How do we know what it feels like? Well, we have first-hand accounts, from the leftover bits of the vampires swimming around in Diablerists' heads. Because guess what? When you diablerize another vampire, their essence doesn't go away. Their soul and persona, along with their abilities, are absorbed and melded into the assailant's body. Diablerie isn't just murder, it is the rape and pillaging of the soul, a murder in which the final step is to lock the victim up inside your head with you, forever, screaming to get out, screaming that they'll kill you, screaming in agony until finally the screaming stops, and they begin to try and exert their will in more subtle ways. Needless to say, this act is somewhat frowned upon in polite kindred society. Often, in authoritarian domains, even normal killings of vampires are prohibited by the prince's right of destruction, preventing public intercovenant violence under stretched interpretations of the third tradition. But what's Amaranth? You keep saying Diablerie. I thought the rule was called Amaranth. Right you are. You see, the name of the tradition is derived from a Roman-era practice of leaving an amaranth flower at the haven of a kindred you intended to diablerize, giving them a fair warning of the peril they were in and the option to retreat to the safety of another domain. This was thought to ease the burden of guilt on the diablerous soul if they succeeded in the act. A heinous crime with traditional pleasantries, rape preceded by a bouquet, a sin so grievous, so cruel, and so immoral that you have to be instructed by your elders not to do it, a transgression so severe as to be unthinkable, and yet common enough to need a name and associated rituals, and if it scars you so badly as the aggressor, why does anyone do it at all? Power. Simply put, Diablerie is the single fastest way for a kindred to thicken their blood and obtain clan-exclusive disciplines or skill boosts, not to mention that it thins the predatorial herd that much more. Run faster, jump higher, scare harder, and store more precious vitae, all for the low price of a guilty conscience, a tainted aura, and a fractured soul. So while it's forbidden and carries genuinely brutal consequences, both as a result of the act and of its discovery, plenty of kindred, especially disempowered neonates, have chosen to risk breaking the third tradition over the centuries in the pursuit of elevating themselves. Beyond the basic admonitions and advising against from above, there are those who whisper darker versions of the original rumors, who say that Diablerie has the potential to be more than death, that it does not destroy the vampire at all, but instead synthesizes the pair fully, that both kindred die in the act, and something new and altogether more horrible is born in its place. But hearsay aside, these are the laws. We should move on now to the covenants which nightly enforce and transgress them. The Five Covenants. As established, even with all of their territorial and predatory urges, vampires cannot help but organize themselves in ways which mirror human families, companies, peerages, and religions. The Five Covenants are, in the 20th and 21st centuries, the prevailing examples of this phenomenon on the global stage, despite the fact that they are almost universally organized as region-locked chapters. Although they do not always coexist peacefully, and even endure cycles of total war against each other in certain principalities, expect to see at least a handful of representatives from each covenant in every domain, as they are the largest ideological camps and provide desperately lonely creatures with a sense of community and purpose, meaning that their ranks swell rapidly when given the chance. In addition to a creed, modus operandi, and broader cultural identity, the Covenants also define themselves by their unique supernatural abilities, to be detailed in their respective sections. Unlike clan status, which is innate, Covenant status is chosen by each individual kindred, and must often be lobbied or worked for through service to the Covenant before full membership is granted. Covenants also vary significantly by region, and, depending on their status on the local totem pole, can look completely different from one place to another, although they're anchored by core ideals and their abilities. When one of the covenants takes control of a domain, the titles of that domain often reflect that covenant's sensibilities and core roles. Vampires who eschew covenant membership and ignore the pecking order are known as unaligned. This status carries with it both freedom and danger, as each choice and action are your own, but the consequences of said choices are also solely yours to bear. Long-term unaligned kindred are likely to be even more staunchly principled than any of the groups they reject, as refusing the resources and protection offered by any one of the covenants for more than a short while is a feat of willpower that can only be derived from extreme personal convictions. Now, without further ado, the Factions 5. The Invictus. The First Estate, as they are often called, is the ideal covenant to begin the discussion of the five with, as they are the simplest in motivation, power structure, and habits. Simply put, the Invictus's sole focuses are to consolidate wealth, security, and power, and to enforce the traditions or local laws to the end of bolstering these three previous goals. They are the monarchy, the faceless megacorporation, and the mafia. The Invictus structure is predicated on its position at the top of the hierarchy. Winning is what makes their ideology make sense. They're in charge because they have assumed the posture of one in charge since the fall of the Camarilla, Rome's kindred senate. Throughout the Middle Ages, they ruled within nations, hoarding blood and wealth immeasurable, and commanding pockets of local gentry to steer the course of European history, marking the closest that humanity has ever come to being ruled by vampires. And if not for the innate restlessness of the kindred soul and constant assault from rival factions, they very well may have accomplished just that. But with the Enlightenment came the Great Dying, and the ancients of the medieval period gave way to the new caste, whose ambitions were more intimate and individual than ever before, preferring absolute control over small domains to the massive wars of conquest which defined the previous age. Now, in modernity, the Invictus serve as a lightning rod for personal greed and social paranoia, collecting kindred who fear the early death of the unaligned, generating strength through numbers, legitimacy through presence, and respect through force. In a way, the greatest strength of the Invictus is their lack of convictions or beliefs beyond the necessity of control. While other covenants are internally divided across time and space by changes in spiritual systems or altered dogma, the Invictus way has always been simple. Do what you're told, and take when the taking's good. These rules make collaboration across domains more feasible than in other covenants. Greed never fails to supply a stream of recruits, and the only barrier to entry is a willingness to do your time at the bottom. The only catch is, it might take a few hundred years before a better spot opens up. Their supernatural works are the oaths, blood pacts of allegiance and fealty that bind lieges and vassals to their word, sometimes on pain of death, and bolster their odds of succeeding in sworn goals, among other niche abilities. The Lancea et Sanctum. The Second Estate to the Invictus' first, and the Catholic Church to their medieval empire. The Sanctified represent the theocratic state, the Church Universal, and the cult of the one true God. Understanding themselves as the moral compass of the damned, they preach a highly specialized occult monotheistic doctrine that both seeks to explain the kindred condition and provide a holy purpose to the long nights of sin. While Christianity, especially Catholicism, is the most prevalent belief system from which the sanctum derives its mission, the Second Estate can and will take up root wherever mortals profess to follow the one true God, whether he be Yahweh, Jehovah, Jah, Allah, Waheguru, or the Heavenly Father. The most popular legend says that the Roman soldier Longinus, who pierced Jesus' side with his spear to check if he was truly dead, was also, after a fashion, testing his divinity in mutilating the corpse of God. When Christ's side burst, his blood fell upon bold Longinus's lips, and in tasting the mortal flesh of an immortal being, he was cursed by God to walk the earth as a vampire. The Covenant does not claim this as the origin of all vampires, but it does see it as proof of their connection to the will of the Almighty in general. Like Satan, they reason, kindred are cursed by God for their wickedness, only, unlike the Lord of the Flies, they are permitted to walk the earth freely. How to reconcile these disparate facts? Well, the Dark Priests reason, the kindred must be God's chosen monsters, here for the twofold purpose of herding and culling. The Lance and its followers believe that the damned are to serve God first by destroying those who would threaten his faithful. This means that the sanctified often operate in superposition with mortal churches, watching over their members from the shadows and protecting the attendants zealously from moral corruption or physical danger. In regions of the world where Christianity and its offshoots are persecuted, the Lance operates most zealously, spilling blood immeasurable to protect its chosen. This altruism is balanced in larger domains by the second, more sinister missive. The second task the sanctified believe themselves entrusted with is that of the wolf, which makes the good shepherd a necessity. By the same token with which they protect the devout and innocent, they also tempt and corrupt the fallible members of his flock. While a member might intervene in the mugging of a deaconess on her way home from service, killing her assailant and posing as a dark guardian angel, that same vampire might stoke a disreputable pastor's lust, consuming him entirely once he has proven himself to be unfaithful to his ministry and his family. Make no mistake, the sanctified are still monsters, a fact that they themselves readily acknowledge at every opportunity. The truth is that they believe themselves to be infallible, holy monsters guided by a higher purpose, which often makes them the most dangerous monsters of all. The Lenkeia et Sanctum have created several supernatural works, the greatest of which is Theban sorcery, blasphemous magics which allow the damned to emulate saintly miracles and acts of God, alongside other spiritual enchantments.
And pens, bits and pieces, and the magic from my hand are making weird signs. Things I've never seen before.
The Ordo Dracul. The Order of the Dragon are a league of vampiric scientist sorcerers tracing their lineage back to none other than Vlad III Draculaea, two-time voivode of Wallachia. Using every available resource, both mundane and supernatural, the dragons seek to emulate their predecessor, who was said to have been sired by God himself and to have attained total mastery over the vampiric condition. They are the mad scientist, the disheveled professor, the homeopathic quack, and the back alley doctor. Their objective is transcendence, using scientific experiments and supernatural rites to better understand kindred undeath and to push its limits, granting access to modes of existence heretofore undreamt of. Originating as a secret society founded by Tepez's Childer brides Mara, Anushka, and Lizette, the Ordo spread throughout Europe beneath the surface of normal kindred society, existing in small pockets on the fringes until the 19th century, when advancements in science and a downturn in religious persecution led their chapters to become increasingly public and unified. The publishing of Bram Stoker's Dracula at the end of the 1800s also saw a viral boost in kindred publicity for the Order, despite its titular vampire sharing little with Vlad beyond his name. Finally, at the peak of its new success, the physical and philosophical devastation of the Twin World Wars, which touched even vampiric society with their all-consuming violence, shattered the Order into increasingly estranged factions known as rites. Although this initially appeared to onlookers to be the end of the Ordo Dracul's golden age of prominence, its scholars now see this collapse and diasporic spread to be the beginning of a new era of truly limitless potential rather than an ending. Because if the dragons know anything, they know the only constant is change. Despite this shift in scope from its originally intimate purview, the disparate and fractaline members of the Covenant still seek transcendence through the coils, their supernatural works which grant them control over individual elements of kindred physiology. From waylaying frenzies, increasing the addictive qualities of the blood, and even robbing the very sun of its sting, the many mad scientists of the Order warp the vampiric form nightly with the results of their mentor-student programs, cutting a distinct swath through their local domains with their uncanny abilities. Just know that new recruits don't tend to last long, as the dragon's methods of research tend towards higher rates of attrition, and those that do survive are forever changed. For who could return to an undeath of fear and ignorance once they have begun to chase the dragon's tail?
Controls the past now, controls the future.
The Carthian movement. The 18th and 19th centuries were a time of constant political upheaval on a global scale, as the ideals of the Enlightenment took root and flourished, toppling monarchies, installing republics, and transforming the notions of an individual's role in society. This age of revolution did not go unnoticed in the dark reflection of humanity that is the Danse Macabre. With every mortal king deposed, every fortress sacked by peasants, and every colony freed of the shackles of its mother country, a sense of possibility bloomed in the breast of the world's young kindred. As humanity found its burgeoning social conscience, even vampires began to believe that perhaps they too were owed inalienable rights, that their vote should count. Inevitably, these kindred found each other and began to work towards something new. Across the West, a name took hold. The Carthian movement, an umbrella title threading through different nations, ideologies, and clans, a name that meant progress, upheaval, and revolution. In modern nights, Carth sects have grown varied alongside the mortal political consciousness to encompass a vast birth of ideologies, with individual domain leagues representing socialism, communism, liberal democracy, populist fascism, anarcho-capitalism, and even hybrids between world faiths and Carthian theory. While a given domain is often focused on one big-name idea at a time, the firebrands find that their differences are generally smoothed out by underdog status. It is also important to note that while the Covenant is young compared to its rivals, and that many neonates do find their first home within the movement, 250 years has been plenty of time for Carth to develop its own class of elders who believe in the cause as much as any youngin'. Suffice to say that wherever kindred, young or old, are coming together to bring the light of socio-political change to the dark, stagnant, feudal world of the Danse Macabre, there is the movement. The supernatural work of the firebrands is Carthian law, a technique which utilizes the combined supernatural auras of the movement's masses to inflict harm on those who would violate the public trust for their own gain. When laws are established in a city, Carthians make sure that no tyrant tramples them, or at least that the despot does so at their own peril. Regardless of the human revolutions a group may take inspiration from, there are 4 principles known as the Pillars, which form the essential elements of Carthian philosophy on a global scale. Number 1. Tolerance when possible. Carth is a big tent. The movement's mission necessitates that, in pursuit of social change, individuals with conflicting ideas and philosophies work together, at least while their respective factions remain disenfranchised. In an effort to both bolster the Covenant's capacities for action and cultivate an environment of mutual respect, every kindred within the Covenant is given the opportunity to voice their opinion with the hope that cooperation will inevitably result. 2. Collective action. The Carthian movement seeks to attract the largest breadth of kindred possible, and eschews isolationism. The more vampires that can be mobilized to the cause, the better. This style of organization both justifies and benefits from the first pillar. 3. Individual rights. Potentially the most important ideal, Carthians believe that all sapient vampires have the right to exist, the right to freely associate with others of their kind, and the right to roam from place to place, both inside and outside domains unaccosted, unless they inhibit the freedom of others or threaten the collective well-being. 4. The duty of wholeness. Carthians believe that the undead condition is inherently restrictive and inevitably leads to suffering, and that each vampire must individually acknowledge this fact by pursuing a wholeness of being. Whenever possible, Carthians believe in indulging themselves as a means of staving off insanity, refusing to deny their nature as a salve for the harsh realities of the Requiem, and attempting to retain a degree of attachment to humanity, but never at the cost of forgetting what they are. But, before you go all starry-eyed and run down to the nearest Covenant outpost to join your fanged comrades in arms, remember that Hitler was a revolutionary. Remember Mao, Pol Pot, and Stalin. Remember the Reign of Terror and the Cultural Revolution. And most of all, remember that Carth is concerned with the rights of vampires. Nobody ever said anything about humans. The Circle of the Crone. Enough rules, enough tradition, enough hiding from what you are behind a veneer of civility, behind religion, behind politics, behind science. When you're ready to admit that you're a monster and start having fun because of that fact rather than in spite of it, the Mother's Army will be waiting for you. The Circle of the Crone is a loose association of neo-pagan spiritual groups, covens that have sprung up from the murk of folklore and the bloody reality of kindred sorcery to perform their sacred duty as the witches in the wild. Their origins are shrouded in myths that vary from one branch to the next. Their methods are as diverse as the legends they call upon for guidance and power, and their agenda changes from night to night, barring an ever-present thread of revelry and violence. If you're struggling to form a coherent picture, good. That's part of the magic. Because of their vague and often conflicting origins and practices, one must speak of the ever-shifting horde that moves along the fringes of kindred society in generalizations. The heretics are often guided by a mother goddess, a crone, a blood queen, any number of names for a mad woman who has taken it upon herself to wear the thorned crown, for however long her moment may last. They generally celebrate their monstrous state, which they see as a blessing rather than a curse, with bloody bacchanals, orgies, festivals, and sacrificial rites. They typically are attached to a group of humans who follow the kindred of the Covenant with an attitude of reverent awe, whether that cult be pagan, New Age religion, or simply of personality, using the mortals to get what they need, and more importantly, what they want. Beyond the fuzzy impression of the bitch mother's brood as seen by an outsider, there are two important truths. The first is that their supernatural work is Kruak, a dangerous and potent system of blood sorcery developed piecemeal across the 2 centuries that the outer cults have been calling themselves the Circle. What does it do? Wouldn't you like to know? Because that's the second definite, the second truth. The Circle doesn't tell its secrets to outsiders, ever. But if divining the secrets of reality, killing your enemies from miles away, or drinking a blood tax through the mouth of another sound appealing to you, the Mother's Army could always use another acolyte. As a matter of fact, there's an initiation tonight, midnight, near the Broken Footbridge in the backcountry. Come naked. Bring a goat. Five covenants, 5 ways of unlife, 5 factions vying for power and influence wherever those most intoxicating of substances are to be found. What keeps them at the bargaining table? What keeps them from open war, from tearing each other apart limb from limb until only one is left standing? How could groups with such extreme differences in philosophy and culture coexist, especially when led by literal inhuman monsters? In the end, the answer is relatively simple. All 5 of the covenants and the various splinter cells which they occasionally beget are, 1. Made up of kindred, carriers of the blood which calls to the blood. The commonalities between vampires, especially ones which share a clan, make the interdependent nature of kindred society difficult to forget or ignore. In addition to this supernatural connection, there is also the mundane reality that different covenants cultivate different resources, and it's often easier to work with other groups to secure the assets you need than it is to gather them yourself. 2. Generally committed to observing the traditions, regardless of their larger systems of belief. While there are many differences worth spilling vitae over, members of the 5 covenants can at least be counted on to agree that the rules they feel pulsing through their very veins must be held to as much as possible. Especially in matters of the masquerade, it would be extremely rare to find dissenters among the core factions, and such heresy would be swiftly dealt with. And 3. Periodically united against greater enemies. Whether it be a skirmish with Gnostic Kine in defense of the lie, a united front against a mad Elder Draugr and his army of larvae, protecting the collective domain from an external supernatural threat, or even simply teaming up to cut a particularly ambitious faction down to size, there are as many reasons to look past differences in unlifestyle as there are threats to the collective kindred welfare. And believe you me, there are plenty of those. Yes, even in the face of all their dread powers, their disciplines, their egomania and hubris, there are still things out there that scare the monsters. Here they are now. Here are some antagonist factions and oppositional forces encountered by vampires in the setting, and what makes them dangerous and distinct from the playable factions. Belial's Brood. While both the Lancea et Sanctum and the Circle of the Crone see kindred as inherently monstrous, either as God's faithful damned or an innate part of the supernatural food chain, the Brood believes vampires to be demons made flesh, incarnations of satanic rage and destruction, escaped onto the earth to wreak indiscriminate havoc. They see the beast as the whole of vampiric identity, seeking to destroy any and all traces of the man while still regaining a measure of identity and self-possession. Where other covenants understand the wisdom of keeping to the shadows, the claimed do not respect the importance of the masquerade, choosing instead to commit acts of hedonistic terrorism in the public eye, regardless of the potential consequences. Because of this flagrant disregard for the safety of the lie, Belial's brood has been nearly completely extinguished over the last 200 years by mainstream kindred society, existing only as a handful of single-digit sects roaming from domain to domain, attempting to keep their psychotic principles without being exercised for good. And while the general belief is that the swarm are doomed to disappear, there are those among them who swear that a reckoning is coming, that the children of hell will soon have their day. Hunter cells. There have been at least 1 billion human beings on Earth since the year 1800, and we've been closing in on 10 billion ever since. At least a handful of them were bound to catch on at some point. While the efforts of the collective masquerade have been successful at keeping the overwhelming majority of kind in the dark about the existence of vampires and other supernaturals, there will always be exceptions eager to prove the rule. Whether it be street gangs of ex-thralls banding together to strike the licks where it hurts, holy Catholic warriors on a secret crusade to purge the demons of the night, or a strike force of corporate auditors fighting to free their company from the clutches of kindred control, wherever vampires are hurting humans, humans will eventually try to return the favor, even if they're not always sure exactly what they're fighting. The good news is that while human lynch mobs are extremely dangerous and must be treated as such, so far no hunter group has managed to successfully break the truth about vampires to the rest of humanity. Anecdotal evidence from the mouths of social pariahs just doesn't seem to cut it in terms of outing the kindred to humankind. At least, for now. Nasties. Although the bulk of the supernatural entities in the setting are vampires or vampire-related, there is no accounting for the volume of spirits, haunts, creatures, and uncategorized monsters that exist at the fringes of the darkness. While less than a nightly occurrence, the fact remains that it is likely any given vampire will run into something they don't understand over the course of their long requiem. Something strange, frightening, and deadly. Whether it be an Ordo Dracul experiment gone horribly awry, a mortal tainted and transformed by ancient magic, a werewolf spirit prey loose from containment, or any number of other horrific apparitions, the time may come when your disciplines must serve you in defense against something beyond the pale, something unique in form and singular in violent function. If you survive these moments of struggle against the unnamed stalking horrors beneath the paving stones of reality, call upon the memory when next you're engaged in single combat with one of your own, and remember that it could always be worse. Much worse. The Strix. Striges, the birds of Dis. The shadows pour their ink-black blood into the shape of an unholy owl, and the owls hunt the kindred. Some say the Strix, shifting birds of smoke and darkness, are the progenitors of the vampiric species, that the beast you hear in the back of your head is the echo of the screech owls that ancient sorcerers traded their souls to for eternal life. Some say they're the demons that the brood believes themselves to be, fragments of mortal sin coalesce solely to steal, kill, and destroy. Some say that we're two sides of the same mythical coin, the beautiful transposed against the bestial. The Striges, for their part, say that they hate us, and that they'll never let us go. That's all they say. Legend tells us that the birds were responsible for snuffing out the Camarilla, Rome's undead senate, and for driving the Julie clan to extinction. Similar stories place them as forerunners of disaster, perched on telephone poles before earthquakes, and peering out from trees as city centers erupt in flames. They can become invulnerable, invisible, and can possess humans and vampires alike, using the living and dead as toys, cutting and killing and bleeding just to feel something. They consume us, steal our disciplines and our bodies, and insist that they're simply taking what they're owed, that they're delivering just punishment upon creatures who would deny their monstrous nature. When the owls are on the wing, take heed and flee, if you're able. We are undead. They are death incarnate. Now you understand clans, the blood's distinct branches on the family tree, covenants, the 5 major vampiric socio-political factions, and the antagonists who would see the kindred of these groups destroyed. The interplay between who you are, who you've chosen to be, and who's trying to kill you forms much of the complex dynamics of the Danse Macabre, but even this is an incomplete picture. The final piece of the puzzle is a unit of vampiric organization known as the Coterie, plural coteries. Coteries are the smallest and most intimate social circles of kindred society, often resembling human family dynamics, or at the very least, the tight-knit siblinghood of a street gang. While clans are innate and covenants homogeneous in terms of the supernatural abilities they bestow, coteries are capable of bringing together a diverse coalition of kindred from across all categories and strata on the bedrock of alliance and connection. When your sires turn against you, when the factions you represent betray you for a box of blood bags, when the howling, screaming, shambling things are in your apartment lobby, who do you turn to? For better or for worse, your coterie is the circle you fall back on when the challenges of the night feel too immense for one soul to contend with, and when large-scale politicking leaves you in the dirt. A coterie represents a distinct personal advantage to all involved, with bonds crossing domains and circles of influence, allowing even neonates to hold together amidst the machinations of elders and princes. Some nights, a few close compatriots bound to you by mutual respect can mean the difference between undeath and final death. And maybe it's not always sunshine and rainbows at home, but it's often worth trying to make something work. Coteries tend to change, shatter, and drift apart over the sprawling decades, but having a crew you trust behind you is an essential piece of survival in this world half empty, and often the key factor in fulfilling the promise of eternal life to yourself. And hey, with rent rates like these, you're gonna want some tombmates. In a more cynical light, one can compare their role in kindred society to the feudal system, where the movers and shakers of any given domain are covenants as noble houses, their most devout soldiers as knights, and half a dozen coteries filling in the gaps as mercenaries, ready to be used as pawns in any given conflict regardless of the group's affiliations. Now that we have all this info, let's see how it coalesces to make a campaign. That vampire campaigns naturally want to follow a simple structure that's easy to explain and convenient to replicate in your own group, leading to an experience that seamlessly integrates all levels of gameplay possible within the system and setting over the course of your game's lifespan. The structure is best represented by the combination of a pyramid and a timeline, like so. These 4 tiers each up the complexity and emotional stakes of the gameplay, while the physical stakes remain the same on each rung. You always risk final death, no matter how high you climb. I'll go over the 4 tiers now. In my opinion, it's best for a campaign to begin with the party on the back foot, scrambling for the resources they need to survive. This doesn't necessarily mean that all of the PCs need to be newly embraced, but if not, some kind of fall from grace is often necessary to create stakes and establish why the story begins where it does. The start of the campaign, or chronicle in the game's parlance, should be defined by the pursuit of blood, real estate, and legitimacy. Vampires need vitae to rise every night, need protection from the sun, which rises every day, and need to be considered legal occupants of their domain, lest they risk execution. So the gameplay favors nightly crusades for blood and property until the coterie establishes themselves enough to take on objectives beyond immediate issues of survival. It's likely that while in the first stage of gameplay, you'll have to play out every single day in sequence without skipping around, as the question of what the party is to eat every night still weighs heavily on them at this time. Once feeding grounds or a herd have been established and your vampires have a set modus operandi for obtaining blood, you can dial up the rate of the narrative progression considerably, showing on-screen feeding as a way to ease into a mission or a new arc rather than making it the focus of every session. This is the beginning of Tier 2, in which the party begins to set their sights beyond their needs, looking to enhance and upgrade the things they now only subsist on. This is the season of Want, an important tier in the game which sees rundown duplexes become penthouse apartments, city buses transform into sports cars, and 1-dot disciplines metamorphosize into 4-dot superpowers. While plenty of elders and even younger ancillae can and will still kick your ass, you're beginning to make a name for your coterie, growing your humble circle into a cult of personality and rapidly expanding your sphere of influence. It's in this stage that the costs of your monstrous nature also begin to come home to roost, as your connection to humanity and your touchstones begins to strain under the burden of your increasingly alien lifestyle. Now is a good time to mention that there is no set timeline that these tiers must progress within, since they aren't actually a guide to be followed as much as they are names given to what would naturally be happening in most chronicles anyway. You can, and might, run a very engaging hardcore chronicle that never progresses past mere survival for longer than a few weeks at a time before it's all taken away again. More on that later. Tier 3 sees the players set their sights on larger objectives than ever, goals and storylines that might not have room to progress on even an in-game weekly basis. These are the months of planning and resource gathering necessary to execute a major coup of a local covenant, the fortnights of study spent mastering a new facet of your undead form, the years spent chasing fugitive nemeses and former lovers. If Tier 2 introduces personal and interpersonal concerns beyond survival, Tier 3 introduces regional and even global concerns into the purview of the Chronicle. The true extent of the player's ability to affect the metaplot of your setting is entirely up to personal preference. Not all licks deserve a chance to save the world, after all. But regardless of the power level of the game, Tier 3 sees it at its highest zenith. But what about the endgame? Well, that's a little bit more complicated, because there's one layer on the pyramid we haven't mentioned yet. Final Death. The bottom of the pyramid. The thing that you're climbing up and away from when you secure resources and develop your character's skills. In a setting like the Chronicles of Darkness, character death is an ever-present threat, and can be seen as the stick to the carrot of the endgame. Like I alluded to earlier, there's no set timeline for how the tier should progress, because there's no guarantee you stay at that tier of play forever. It's always completely possible to skip around and drop down tiers. The nature of a narrative with stakes is that you stand to lose it all, to fall down from earning yourself new mid-game rewards to being back on the street, draining rats in the gutter. The nature of Infinity is a cycle, variations on a theme. You go up the mountain, and you come back down, and you go up again. This is what it is to be immortal. Except, again, you're not immortal. In theory, Final Death in Vampire, as it is in all TTRPGs, is the state in which you can no longer justify your character's existence without admitting that you have dispensed with the traditional rules of the game. It's the state of play that you fall to when your character fails to meet their physical and material needs, generally the need to not be decapitated, and signals a cessation of their arc in the greater story. Oh wait, sorry, you asked about the endgame. Okay, let me get to that. Here. The endgame refers to the state in which the narrative has come to a satisfying enough conclusion that the game must be closed and finished with. Often this involves the longest jumps in time of all, as the group details their epilogue in a collaborative, diceless fashion. Here's a good way to think about it. If you're still rolling dice, you're not in the endgame. The endgame is saying, okay, I get the picture. The four of us are going to do this forever. It's saying, things can never go back to the way they were before, and that's how the story ends. It's a wide shot of the final vamp left standing, closing himself into a cement coffin for a long, long nap, knowing that the world is going to be a very different place when he wakes up. Because vampires are agelessly immortal, the story can only end in two ways: dying or never dying ever. But every chronicle must come to a close nonetheless, which leaves the players with the task of truncating a small infinity. In my opinion, the way that you know you've reached the endgame is when the layers beneath it vanish on the pyramid. When you feel your story is complete and you can no longer entertain the idea that you have any metaplot participation left in you, no desires unfulfilled that you still wish to fulfill, and you're still not dead, that's the endgame. What was I talking about again? What was the point of this? I guess just go download the book. Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition. Yeah, the one from 10 years ago, yeah. The sequel to the 2004 one. No, it's not Masquerade. No, yeah, the other one. What? I don't know. Just go play it with your friends or something. No, this isn't an ad. I mean, I guess it's like an ad to play Vampire with me, or to play Vampire with yourself, to play with each other's vampires, you know? Just go buy this dead game or steal it or something. Thank you to this video's sponsors: Lead Pipes, Asbestos, Black Mold, Eccentric Genius Syndrome, Vampires, Dracula, Minerman 60101, Dracula, Dragula, Vampires, Blue Light, Water Confetti, Dragula, Dracula Flow, The Idea of the Year 1967, Nirvana, Kurt Cobain.
1, 2, 3. If you close the door, the night could last forever. Leave the sun shine out and say hello to never. All the people are dancing and they're having such fun. I wish it could happen to me. But if you close the door, I'd never have to see the day again.